Hey,
How old are you?
23.
Cool. Do you disagree with my backdrop?
Yeah, I guess my first question is what do you define a communist as?
Well, the way that I'm talking about it here is kind of this idea that universal positive rights exist and that people are entitled to things simply because they need them.
They need universal positive rights. Like what do you mean by a right then? Like what does that
No,
mean?
what no, what I'm saying is that it seems to be that pro-lifers believe that people are entitled to the labor or resources of others simply because they need them in order to sustain life. And the idea of universally applied positive rights is kind of communist.
Oh, okay. So would you say then that the right to life that everyone's allowed to lose it then?
No, I would say the right to life is a negative right, which means that the only obligation from others is that they don't unjustly deprive you of this thing that you already have. It's not contingent on the provision of labor or resources from other people. It
So
has nothing.
so so I guess my next question is what do you use as a dividing line of okay we can keep this universally applied positive right but we can't keep this universally applied positive right, like what's
I
that
don't believe
dividing line?
I don't believe in universally applied positive rights. I think that
Then
I think that like I acknowledge three fundamental human rights with like other entitlements kind of underneath them, but I recognize life, liberty, and property as being kind of the three fundamental ones, and all three of these are going to be negative rights
okay, then what makes those that they should be universally applied then?
as negative rights.
Yeah, like why?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's intuitive to say that we're entitled to things just because we need them. I think if we are to receive things from others, we need to ground like a sound justification as to why they must provide them. I just think that sheer necessity is going to be insufficient. I think that like when we talk about the right to property, I don't think that means I'm entitled to property. I think it means if I already own something, it would be morally impermissible for somebody to take it from me. Similarly, if I'm currently living, I think it would be morally impermissible for somebody to deprive me of life. Not that I am entitled to, say, like the resources or labor from other people in order to sustain my life.
So would you essentially say your position just to steel man it and just kind of sum it up nicely? Essentially, policy should be dictated as policy that does not violate any negative rights whatsoever. Correct?
Well, I'm saying that imposing an obligation for women to endure unwanted pregnancies is really what it's doing is it's turning the right to life into a positive right when really it should be considered a negative right. So I would just say like equally applying these ideas in womb out of womb I think is probably the most intuitive stance.
Well, I guess like in womb and out of womb. How come you make that distinction then? Would
I
you
don't.
agree? You don't.
I
So
don't. I think they should be equally observed. So if the right to life is a negative right outside the womb, it should be a negative right inside the womb.
so then the baby has the negative right to life. Then correct?
Correct.
Correct. So then by the woman aborting the baby, that would then violate that negative right to life.
No, because in my view, the removal is justified. So again, it's going to be morally impermissible for somebody to deprive you of life without justification. So that
What?
would be murder.
What's the justification?
Protection of bodily integrity and property rights.
Protection of bodily integrity and property rights. Okay. Okay. So say for example, a woman has a marriage. She has sex with a guy. Obviously, she gets pregnant. 9 months in, maybe about like 5 days before labor, she's like, "I want an abortion." You support that?
No, I think she has the right to get an induction or a C-section. I think abortion should be restricted to the time prior to viability. But I do believe in the right to terminate pregnancy and evict the child, remove the child in the gentlest way possible all 9 months.
Gentlest way possible. And your justification for negative rights existing then?
Yeah, these moral entitlements are just abstract concepts that recognize and preserve the dignity and flourishing of human beings. So we can talk about how these are enforced, within a structured
I'm
society.
looking for the justification though
For what?
for the negative rights existing.
It just seems intuitive to me that like life, liberty, and property ought be protected. As violating these fundamental concepts are going to like result in significant harm, unjustified harm to people.
So
So
our
I yeah.
so our
So
public policy then should be dictated on what seems intuitive to you. Then is that what you're saying?
not necessarily. I mean,
You
if we're
just
talking,
you
no,
just,
Well, this is
You're
a moral discussion. Yeah, this is a moral discussion. So when I talk about human rights, I'm referring to like moral entitlements. We can have a discussion about legal entitlements, but I mean, human
Yeah, well,
rights.
I'm looking because, well, let's just be honest, the moral entailments and the legal entailments, they all draw from your morality, which seems to be libertarianism, and I'm questioning the foundations of libertarianism right now. I think that's a very relevant discussion
Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly what you're asking me. I mean, I think
because I'm asking for your justification of why should negative rights be enforced in legal law and practice. The negative
probably
rights of
because I don't know.
life, liberty.
Probably because the majority of people like agree with this.
Well, the majority of people used to agree with child sacrifice back in the day.
Yeah, I would say that like probably the closest we can get to some sort of a democratic society. That's probably pragmatically going to be the most fair. So I think if like the majority of people in a society wish to impose like certain restrictions or pass certain laws, I may find them to be immoral. I may not like them, but unless you can arrive at a better system, then
Why are we talking about fairness and equality then of outcome?
well, I'm not
What
talking about
society finds
fairness
most
or
fair?
equality. Yeah, I'm just talking about like the best way pragmatically to like implement laws and restrictions and control within society so that people can have the best shot at flourishing.
The best shot flourishing. Okay, so then, for example, with abortion, if we're going to talk about human flourishing, we should probably talk about the birth rates then. You
What?
familiar with the birth rates in like America, for example?
Oh, that they're declining.
Yeah.
What about that?
Essentially, that if you want humans to flourish, you need, well, humans to flourish in the first place. You need human
Oh, I
beings.
don't know. I don't need. I don't care. I don't care if everybody who is currently living right now, if that's the last generation of humans to live. I'm talking about people that are already living. I don't care about.
Okay, so the first part of human flourishing, which is humans, need not apply. So you don't actually care
No,
about
no, no.
human
I'm talking
flourishing.
about human beings. No, like I'm talking about human beings that are already here, being able to live in a way in which they're meeting their goals, they're happy, they're thriving. That doesn't necessarily necessitate that they reproduce.
Well, it seems like if we want to
I said
have as much
humans
human
and not the.
flourish, let me make
I
the
didn't say
argument.
like
It
the
seems like
well,
if
hold
we
on.
want
I
as
just
much
want to clarify.
humans.
Hold on, Costin. Hold on. I don't mean to mute you, but I didn't say the human race. I said human beings.
Yeah,
Okay.
and my argument then is we care about human beings flourishing. It seems like the easiest way to have as most human flourishing as possible is the generation of new human beings. Am I
Oh, I
not
don't
correct
think
in
that's.
saying that?
Yeah, I don't think that's necessarily true. For some people, what's going to constitute flourishing is to be childless.
For some people, I'm talking about the average person.
Oh yeah, I just believe in agency. If you want to reproduce, go for it. I don't. I think it's a morally neutral act. Like I think reproduction in and of itself, or like continuance of the human race, is morally neutral. I don't really care about it
How is it morally neutral?
because I don't think it's good or bad. I don't think it's right or wrong.
Do
I
you
think
think
it.
anything's good or bad?
Yeah, sure.
What? Yeah, what?
uh, yeah, probably like human rights violations. I think are bad.
And why should we care about human rights? What's your justification?
Because like failing to uphold like negative obligations as they pertain to other human beings causes unnecessary and unjustified harm, and I find this distasteful.
And why is this bad then? Because you find it distasteful. That's it.
Yeah, because my intuitions tell me that like unnecessary harm is generally going to be bad.
What if, for example, one population, one country says, "Hey, we don't like this other country. I don't know. Maybe they stole some land from us 1,000 years ago. Maybe our holy books say it's bad, and we need to go eradicate the other country." And that country has more people than the country they're invading. Um, is it distasteful then to say, "Hey, don't do that because it's distasteful to me"?
Well, I think that like it's going to like in order to invade another country, like wars, generally entail like human rights violations. So I think that's bad.
And again, why? Because you find it distasteful.
Yeah, I find it distasteful.
I mean, what stops me from saying, well, I find that people accepting this notion of human rights is distasteful? What stops me from saying that and being
Nothing.
wrong? Nothing.
Nothing. If you said that, if you believe that that was the case, I would just like pose some reductios your way to see if you truly believe that, or if your like belief like lends itself to an absurd conclusion that you don't even find intuitive. But
Well,
you can believe it.
I think you're the one making the absurd conclusion then because you're prescribing objective oughts for society
No, no, not at all.
based
No,
on,
I'm
yeah,
a.
yeah, you are.
Oh no, no, no! I'm a moral subjectivist. Absolutely not.
So you're then why should we be pro-choice all 9 months then?
Because I think I have a strong, convincing argument, and I think it's persuasive. And if you want to take me down a line of questioning to find out why, you can do that, and then you can give me some reductios and hypotheticals to see if I land at any absurd conclusions, and perhaps you'll agree with my position. If you disagree with me,
Well, I
we
think there's
can.
a yeah. Well, there's a clear logical fallacy, or not fallacy. There's a logical contradiction you're making right now. Is that you're a moral subjectivist? You don't believe in any moral ought claims to be objectively true. But then
Well,
at
what
the
do you
same
think
time,
objective means? Hold on, real
let
quick.
me make the
Oh,
argument. Let me make the argument.
hold on.
Then you are
Sorry, I don't mean
making
to mute you again, but before we get into your argument, we need to get the semantics out of the way. What do you mean by objective?
objectively true. That's what I mean by
No,
objective.
just define objective for me, please.
Something that compacts with reality or is logically coherent.
Okay, when I think of objective, I think of mind independent.
Mind independent. Okay, that
Yeah,
works
mind or
too.
stance independent. Sure.
That works too. So then why are you making objective claims about negative rights of human beings?
Oh, I'm not.
Okay. Okay, so you're not then. So
No.
when I say that, for example, that, or excuse me, when you say, excuse me, I misspoke there, that an abortion is not violating the negative rights of a child and the fetus, that's not an objective claim then?
When I'm saying that?
Yeah, when you're saying that, that's not
Yeah.
objectively.
I don't, yeah. No. No. Certainly, it's not objectively true. It's going to be stance dependent, and it's a part of my argument. It's a part of my position, which is very much mind dependent. But I think I can articulate it pretty clearly. If you
Well,
steel
well,
man my position, I can like lay out the syllogism for you. I
well
mean, if you
I'm trying to
you accept.
understand. I'm trying to understand, but you keep saying that all of your positions are mind dependent, that none of them are objectively
Yes.
true. Then
All,
why
just to
are
be
you
clear.
trying to argue for
Yeah,
anything
just to be
then?
clear. Yeah, just to be clear. I think that all positions that any person has are going to be mind dependent because they exist within the mind.
So nobody can make objective truth statements then by
I think
any sort of sense.
I don't know. I think that like if you were to ask me about certain non-moral claims, certain facts of the universe, I'm inclined to say that perhaps these are true absent a mind or stance to perceive it. But I don't believe that human beings have access to epistemic certainty. I believe in justified true beliefs. I think that's sufficient. Like, is it the case that there is a tree outside of my house and that tree would exist regardless of whether or not I'm there to perceive it. I have reason to believe that that's the case, but I'm not going to make a certainty claim.
Okay. So then why? I guess my next question then, if there's this, and your ideas at least of epistemological skepticism, then why are you making any objective truth claims then?
I'm not making objective truth claims.
So then why are you having this argument in the first place? Are you just here just to argue?
No, because I have a position that I think, well, it's obviously certainly intuitive to me. I think is ultimately intuitive to a lot of people. Perhaps they just haven't thought about it like from this angle. And I think my goal is to get other people to align with my views, because obviously these are things that I like. And so I think that's what any of us are doing. If you have a view or a position about a topic, I think you espouse your belief and you present an argument in order to perhaps get other people to agree with you. Simply because if more people agreed with me, I think it would bring us closer to a society that I would like to live in.
So ultimately, it's all just based on what you want and what you feel
Yes,
like is correct.
absolutely. W moral subjectivism. And by the way, the same would be true for you and for anybody else. If you have a belief or a position about anything, your goal should be to persuade me, so that ultimately we can you would be able to get more people to align with you, and this would bring us closer into a society that you like.
Then what? Then I guess if ultimately speaking, then if you're gonna make ought claims about what society ought to do, then obviously like this case for abortion, I assume you're probably pretty extremely pro-libertarianism, maybe even an ANCAP on say society should be run. I'm not gonna say you are. Obviously, I don't know your position on that, but I assume you're probably pretty pro-market, pro-capitalism, pro-libertarianism. Um,
At least normatively,
Normatively.
I haven't taken much time to really go through the pragmatics. I think that there are a lot of people who hold a view in the polar opposite end. There are a lot of people who identify as communists who may say that, like, normatively, that ideology just really aligns with their own framework. But then pragmatically, there may be some issues. So I haven't quite worked out exactly the political system I would like to see enforced. I just know that there are certain views that I hold that are certainly not compatible with communism, and definitely more compatible with kind of like capitalism as an ideology. But
Okay. So I'm just trying to get all this down in my head. Obviously, I don't have like a notepad or anything to write notes down. So forgive me if I accidentally strawman your positions, and just clarify me if I'm wrong. But my question then is, since we're kind of on the subject, with equal rights, you would then agree with me at least that equal rights, that you're implying the native equal rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness aren't actually objectively real, correct?
Well, I just think these are, when you say real, it's interesting. I think that these are abstract concepts absent an enforcement arm, but concepts are real.
Concepts are real. Okay. Okay, and what makes a concept real?
I would say that somebody is experiencing it. I think concepts exist in the mind, and then certainly they can play out in things that can become very real and material. But just these are ideas and beliefs, and people are experiencing them. People are thinking about them and feeling them, and so I think that that's part of the human experience and one's psychological profile. So I'm comfortable saying that they're real.
And ultimately, it's just because it's based on your own personal perception.
Yeah, I'm a subjectivist, right? So I look at the world as everything is inherently neutral. And we as human beings, we observe things and then we kind of index those things that we're observing back to our own framework, and then we draw a conclusion about what we're witnessing, based upon our own framework, and determine whether or not something is good or something is bad. I think that's what all of us are doing.
Yeah, and then I guess my next question then is, why should we then enforce human rights? Because most people find that it's going to be fair and it's going to make people feel good.
Yeah,
Is
I
it?
think, well, because I think if I are, if not that I necessarily take like a counterfactual approach to harm, but if I were to imagine a world in which we disregarded human rights, I can imagine a world in which people would be experiencing like horrific forms of pain, suffering, torture, and harm. And I just don't like that. That makes me feel icky. So I think that in order to prevent this thing that I find to be very icky, it makes sense to acknowledge and enforce, like basic protections.
It just makes you feel like, okay. And
It makes me
then,
feel really icky. Yeah.
gotcha. So it just seems like to me, at least, and just the follow up question then: would you consider yourself a utilitarian then?
No, no.
Why?
Not at all. Well, because I don't necessarily believe that just because things have like some degree of perceived benefit that it's going to justify like the forfeiture of human rights. For example, I've been asked the question, if let's say tomorrow, every single person who is capable of reproducing, every woman, biological woman who's capable of reproducing, suddenly decides they are not going to engage in intercourse and will not reproduce in any way, shape, or form. The only way to continue the human species would be by graping, like a certain percentage of those women. To me, I would say, even though I do see a degree of utility in keeping, even though I don't really value it so much, I do see utility in the human race continuing, but not to the degree that it would justify
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to
depriving somebody.
interrupt. I'm sorry. Where by utilitarianism, I mean essentially things of utility that encourage human flourishing and human happiness. That's what I meant. Like John
Well,
Stuart Mills.
Well, I mean, I think like it would depend on who you're talking about. So if you're to say that, there's going to be, we could note that if everybody were to have access to education, healthcare, clean water, food, all of these things, human beings would thrive and flourish. That sounds really nice. But in order to achieve these things, unless the people who are contributing to this pot are consenting, it's going to necessitate like violations of pretty much like property rights and like I think number of other human rights. So I don't think that violation of those rights is going to justify the perceived utility there.
The perceived utility there. Okay.
I would hold
So
that to, like, I don't believe in a draft, right? Like we can agree probably that if another country were to say try to invade us or harm us, that we may be justified in defending ourselves, and if we needed to have a draft, I would say that, like, it wouldn't be worth it to me. I think that drafts would constitute a violation of fundamental human rights, so it wouldn't be worth it to me. I'd rather see everybody go than force people to engage in a war without consent.
yeah, but then you talk about human rights again, and then I'm going to ask you the question. Obviously, is okay. Why should we care about human rights? And ultimately, it's just uh, up to you and your
If we were to
personal.
Well, don't you think, like, again, if I'm identifying life, liberty, and property, these are the three fundamentals. Wouldn't you agree that if we were to deprive people of these fundamental human rights, that this would lead to like horrific acts of harm and various human atrocities that really ultimately are unjustified?
I mean, that's most of human history is these rights did not actually exist in any sort of legal framework whatsoever. And regardless of that, why is that bad, objectively speaking?
Well, I mean, again, when we say objective there, I think I'm going to be speaking from my own perspective here. But if I think about certain human rights, like bodily integrity as a human right, are you familiar with bodily integrity?
Morally, when it comes to like abortion, obviously, but I assume, like for example, if you don't want a vaccine or anything like that either, correct?
I'm thinking about grape. Like grape
Grape.
is a
Okay.
yes. So if we were to say that bodily integrity is just this frivolous abstract concept, there's no utility whatsoever in preserving it. I don't see why it would at that point be impermissible within a society for people to just be graping one another. I think that's bad.
But and why is it bad then?
Because I think intrusions, well, there are a number of reasons, but when we're talking about grapes specifically, I think violent intrusions into the body are more akin to intrusions into the self. There's a paper called Bodily Integrity and Conceptions of Subjectivity that's a really good read. And it's this idea that you, as the person, inhabit the body. The body is a physical vessel that you inhabit. And when somebody grapes you, it's worse than just violating like something material or even just harming your body. It's like they're violently intruding into you. And without your consent, obviously, this is horrifying. This is a horrifying, traumatic experience without justification. And so, again, I think if we were to not observe bodily integrity as a fundamental human right, say we don't give a shit about it, people can just do whatever they want, yeah, I think that would lead to some pretty horrific outcomes.
And why are those horrific?
Why are those horrific? Because they
Yeah.
cause people unnecessary and unjustified pain and suffering.
And why is that bad?
Why is that bad? Because
Yeah.
I think that the account of harm that I like would be anything that disrupts a goal. And some forms of harm are justified, but some are not. And I think that when people experience that type of pain and suffering, it hinders them to such a great degree, to such a significant degree, that it perhaps can disrupt. It can disrupt the kind of, I almost want to say, like the telos of the entity itself. It can disrupt kind of like the goal. You have violated somebody to the degree, and they're experiencing whatever psychological state that they're in now. It is causing such distress that and without justification, that it just seems at its reduced down to its fundamentals, is just something that is so antithetical to what I believe in and what I agree with. So it, to me, very simply, it's very harmful, and I don't like unnecessary harm because I wouldn't want to experience it myself. I don't think other people should have to.
Well, it seems like we're going through a circle right now, respectfully, because I ask you, okay, why do you care about the human rights? Why do you care about human rights, negative human rights being
Well,
enforced? Let me just make the argument real quick. You say because if we don't do that, that's going to cause unnecessary harm and human suffering. And I'm like, okay, why is unnecessary harm and human suffering is bad? And it's because uh, unnecessary harm and human suffering is bad. Okay, why is it bad? Because it's bad.
two reasons: it leads to poor outcomes in my view, and also it does not align with my desires and preferences. There is a point when, I don't know if you're an objectivist or subjectivist, but there comes a point when you're debating with a subjectivist that it becomes axiomatic. When you ask somebody to justify their desires and preferences, it would be like me asking you, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
How is it like that?
Well, no, just answer. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Vanilla.
Oh, why?
Because I like vanilla.
Oh, why?
Because I like vanilla. I see the point you're trying to draw here.
Oh. What ice cream flavor do you dislike the most?
I understand the argument.
Well, it's axiomatic, right? So when we get down to why people find things to be desirable or undesirable, sometimes there are reasons for it, but sometimes it just comes down to intuition that just gives us a sense of something where otherwise justification or evidence is not present. Sometimes it's just a seeming. Sometimes it's just a feeling. And I'm sure to some degree that you would be able to relate. Do you think that grape is good or bad?
Bad.
Bad. Why?
Uh, Basically because God says it's bad.
What if there were no God? Would you
What
still
if
find
there?
grape? Yeah.
I
Just let's
I
say.
would I would be a Nietzschean amoralist then.
So in the absence of God. So in this
I just
hypothetical.
gave you my position. I would be a Nietzschean.
Great. So, well, so like a nihilist doesn't necessarily believe that things can't be good or bad. They just really don't believe that there's much of a purpose to anything. But I guess so. So just to be clear, in a world where there is no God, you would not have like a commitment to any moral claims at all.
No, I would have absolutely zero commitment. Why would I? There's no epistemological justification for any sort of morality. Why would I?
You think that's
Yeah, what
because
is your justification? Because it makes people feel bad. Okay, so
because well because I think that watching people suffer um, and experience pain. I don't know why it would necessitate that a God exists in order to not want people to suffer. I think that's
it
what an
no,
alarming view
that's not an alarming view at all. Because
for
that's
sure.
just the logical entailment of it.
Why do
How is
you
that
think?
alarming?
Well, do you think
If
that?
there is no moral justification, if there's no objective epistemological justification for morality, say God, for example, and you can't demonstrate another sort of justification for morality, then why is human suffering actually objectively evil then?
Well, it's not about it being object. No, it's not that it's objectively evil,
But you're
because
talking about it like
again,
it is though, because you're saying,
no,
oh, human
no,
suffering is
no.
so bad.
I think it's bad. I think most people
That's
find it
a
to be bad. You find it to be bad, but what's fascinating is that you only find it to be bad in a world in which God exists. If we were in a world in which God did not exist, but all else equal, if you were to watch, say, like I just want to be so clear, in a world where God does not exist and a toddler was being violently raped, you would find it to be totally morally permissible to pull up a chair and watch.
yeah, if you want it to.
Mhm.
That's
I
logical
would
entailment.
say.
You're just giving me arguments I could use against moral subjectivism.
Well, then let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. If this is just a logical entailment, then why would it be the case that so many atheists do have, in fact, they do have a moral framework?
Because they're not actually they still follow Christian ethics just without
What do
God.
you mean they follow Christian ethics, but
Yeah, they
without
do.
God?
They do.
What does that
You
mean?
can essentially you can actually look up the history of the atheist movement, the secular movement, and the idea of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. These are all Christian ideals that
So
atheists simply imported because it sounds good.
can you give me any like evidence to suggest that your God is real, that your God exists?
Yeah, I can actually. Do you
Like what?
believe in objective truth claims?
Not moral truth claims, and even
I'm
then, I
talking.
don't. Yeah, no, I don't necessarily believe that human beings have access to this epistemic certainty. I'm not saying it's impossible that like objective truths exist in the universe. I just don't think we have any way of knowing for sure.
Is that an objective truth claim then?
No, because I don't make like objective certainty claims. It just seems to be the case.
But wait, so if it's either a yes or no question, is do objective truth claims exist? And maybe
Yeah.
yes, maybe no.
Well, do you remember what I said about like justified true beliefs and how those are sufficient in my view?
Yeah, I understand they're sufficient in your view.
Yeah. So I
I
reject the
understand
notion.
that. I understand
Yeah,
that.
when you're asking me for a yes or no, what you're asking me to do is to
No, it's
say if I
because
can say yes.
I'm trying
No,
to get you
I
to
don't.
say an actual position because regardless if you say
Well,
yes or no, it's still technically a yes because you're giving an objective truth claim.
no, I'm not, because again, when we try to identify what we mean when we say objective versus subjective, objective is going to be mind or stands independent. So when you're asking me if certain truths like exist within the universe, absent a mind, absent a stance of some kind, I don't know for sure. So therefore, I'm not committed to answering you definitively yes. I think it's probably the case. I think it's most likely the case. Seems to be the case. But I'm not going to give you a definitive answer because I don't believe that we have access to that degree of certainty.
So then we have no access to knowledge then.
No, I think knowledge can consist of justified true beliefs. which we do have access to.
You have access to, but they can't be objectively justified true beliefs then, correct?
Well, I don't know. I'm not saying they can't. You're saying they can't. You're saying they can't. That means it's impossible, and I'm not committed to that degree of certainty either. I'm not saying it's possible or impossible. I'm saying I don't know.
You don't know, so then
No.
that then begs the question again of like, if we don't
Costin,
know, why are you trying to then get me to justify God's existence then?
Costin, are we having a conversation on TikTok right now?
Yeah, we are.
Can you prove this?
Yeah.
Oh, how?
Again. Because God.
Because God.
Yes.
Okay. Kind of where I'm going with that is like, how do you know that you're not actually having a very, very vivid hallucination?
Because God.
Because God.
Yep.
Well, what about like a profoundly psychotic person who is actually having like a very, very vivid hallucination? Should they also believe that what they're interacting with is true, in the way that you would use the word true, because God?
Maybe, maybe not.
Oh, well, why should they not, and you should?
I'm not sure. You have to justify why listening to psychotic people is bad.
No, I'm
You
not.
don't have
I'm
any.
not.
You don't have
No, I'm
any.
not saying. No, I'm not saying it's good or bad either way. We're talking about whether or not something is the case. If I'm to steel man your position that we do have access to epistemic certainty because God, what I'm asking you to do is explain to me if your experience, all of your senses are giving you this information, and I'm asking you, do you know that we're really having this conversation? You say yes because God. Well, if somebody who was having a very vivid hallucination, were to ask the same question, I don't understand why that same answer wouldn't be sufficient, lending itself to the same conclusion that yes, what they're experiencing is very, very real.
Well, I can answer that for you. And firstly,
Please.
it doesn't matter because under your worldview, um, the crazy schizophrenic person, they could be telling the truth. They couldn't be telling the truth. You couldn't actually objectively tell under your own worldview. So I don't see why you have an issue with saying it's
You think you
schizophrenic
could,
person
but
and
you
saying it's
think you
God.
could
Well,
though.
I'm
But
making the
here's the
argument.
thing.
Let me finish the point. Let me finish the
Hold
point.
on. You think you could. You think you could. And that's the
Yeah,
problem.
how is that the problem?
Because you believe that your justification, when I ask you, are we really having this conversation? Your evidence is God. But that
Yes.
evidence is going to be insufficient when it comes to the person who is having a very vivid hallucination. I want to know what makes you so special.
What makes me so special? It's
Yeah.
just basic logic. Do
Oh,
you know what the three laws of logic are?
yeah. Identity, contradiction, and excluded middle. But anyway, what I'm
Are
asking
are
you
they
is,
objectively true? Yes or no?
are they objectively true? No, no, because those are still going to
No.
be
Okay,
mine.
so that's an
Yeah.
objective truth claim then. That's an identity claim. You
No,
just contradicted yourself.
no, not at all.
Yes,
No,
you
those are
just
going to be.
did. You just
Well,
did.
wait. You asked me if they're objective, and I said
Yes,
no
and
because they're. Yep, because they're mind dependent. So no.
they're mind dependent. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're
So
mind
that, but then
dependent.
that's an objective truth claim. Then you just made it right there. That's the
No,
appeal to the law of
no,
identity
no,
right there. Yes,
no,
it is.
no,
Yes, it
no.
is.
When I
Yes, it
say,
is. How is it not?
I think because it seems to be the case that the three laws of logic exist because people conceive of them. Perhaps it's the case that these laws of logic would exist absent any mind or absent any stance. I don't have reason to believe it is definitely the case or definitely not the case. I have reason to believe it's probably the case. I think a justified true belief is sufficient. I'm not making any objective certainty truth claims. What I'm saying is that, yeah, probably true. I don't have reason to believe it's not. But I'm not going to give you epistemic certainty. I don't think human beings have access to it. When I asked you to prove to me that we were having this conversation, you just said God.
Yeah.
You weren't able to okay. What about God is going to convince me or provide sufficient evidence to suggest that we are having this conversation right now and that you're not actually having a very, very vivid hallucination?
It's simple. Okay. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the laws of logic,
Mm-hmm.
objective truth, these are things that exist and are universal.
Oh, I'm
They
asking about this
apply every.
conversation.
I'm making the argument. I'm making the argument. Stop spurging for a second. Let me make the argument.
Well, I'm asking, it sounds like you were just going to talk about logic, but I'm asking you how God is going to provide evidence to suggest that we're actually having this conversation and you're not having a hallucination.
Because God is the justification for epistemological certainty and objective truth claims and the laws of logic being objectively true, which apparently you want to throw away despite using the laws
No,
of logic to disprove the
no.
laws of
I just want
logic.
to know how I'm to believe that like you're actually having this conversation with me and that this is not just a figment. We could say a figment of my imagination. How do I know you're real?
Are you the one that's the objective decider of truth then? If it's a figment of your imagination?
Well, I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. If
Yeah, so
you
you don't
believe,
know. You don't
you
know.
believe, well, that's why I'm asking for clarity, right? Because you're the one who believes that human beings have access to epistemic certainty. So I'm looking for evidence to suggest that we're actually having this conversation, and this is not just a very, very vivid hallucination I'm having.
Well,
Can you give me,
I pointed
give
to
me
the
some
laws of
evidence?
logic, which then
Uh-huh.
you denied by appealing to the laws
What
of
what
logic. You're
laws
the
of
one that,
logic? Which laws of logic would be violated if this were in fact a hallucination?
if this were in fact a hallucination, none of them, then that's what makes them true.
Oh, so if it were a hallucination, none of the laws of logic would be violated?
No, because then that would be an objective identity
So
claim that this
so it's
conversation
logically
was a
possible.
hallucination.
Okay, so it's logically possible that this is a hallucination. Great. So
Uh,
so that doesn't help me.
no, it does though, because the laws of logic are still objectively true, even if this
I'm not
conversation
asking
was a
about the laws of logic.
hallucination. We're
No, I'm
talking
not
about the laws
asking.
of logic of epistemological
Whoa,
justification.
Caution.
This is
No,
relevant.
Caution.
This
I'm
is
not
relevant.
asking you. I'm not asking you about the laws of logic right now. I'm asking you if we're actually having this conversation or if you're just a vivid hallucination.
And what I said is, regardless, because my justification for objective certainty, for epistemological certainty to be objectively true, is the laws of logic.
No, but we've already established that no laws of logic are contradicted if this were in fact a hallucination. So what I'm trying to do is
That
get you
means
to
the laws of
prove
logic
to
are
me.
still objectively true.
Wait, I'm not asking you about the laws of logic. I'm not asking you
That's
about that.
one of my that's one of my points in my argument for
We've already
epistemological
established
certainty.
that it is. We have already established that it is logically possible for this conversation to be occurring in my brain. We've
Sure,
already
that is, and that
great.
doesn't
So
violate the
now I'm
laws
even
of
more
logic.
great. So now I'm even more confused. I thought the goal
How,
was
how
for
are you
you to convince.
how are you
Yeah,
more
because the
confused?
goal was for you to
You
convince
just
me.
gave me the argument that the laws of logic are still universally
Because
true, even if
wait,
this whole
no, no,
conversation
no.
was a hallucination in your brain.
So when I'm asking you to give me evidence, which is going to justify this idea that we're actually having this conversation as opposed to this occurring in my brain, you're not giving me evidence to suggest that this is actually happening. I'm still unsure.
What's the standard of evidence then?
I don't know. You haven't provided really
You're
anything.
you're the one demanding evidence for me to prove to you that this
I don't
conversation
know.
you're
Why don't
having
you
in your
just like
brain.
throw? You could just like throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks. I would
No,
say.
I'm asking what your standard of evidence is then.
I would say that at this point, I'll be super charitable and I'll say that I don't really have much of a standard. If it sticks, it sticks. So let's just like see what you have.
I'm just wondering. I'm just
Oh, I don't know.
wondering.
What do you have? Like, what do you have? Give me the
So,
best that you have. Give me the most convincing one that you have.
well, I will just appeal to the laws of logic then, since apparently if this conversation if it was a hallucination, the laws of logic still would be objectively true. That means
I'm
that
not asking. I'm not
that
asking.
infers to their
I'm not
certainty.
asking.
Yes, it
I'm
is.
not asking if the laws of logic are objective. All I'm asking you is if I'm having a conversation with you on TikTok or I'm having a very vivid hallucination. I'm not asking you about universal truths. I'm not asking you about objective morality. I'm not asking you about the laws of logic. All I'm asking you is to give me sufficient evidence to suggest that we are certainly, definitely having this conversation on TikTok and that I am not having a vivid hallucination.
And I'm going to ask you, what is your standard of evidence? What
I
counts
said,
and
I
what
said,
doesn't
give
count?
me.
And you are saying
Well, I said, give
whatever
me
you want to throw
anything.
at the wall, and
The
I'm
problem
throwing the
is
laws of
what you.
logic at
Yeah,
you.
the problem is that when you give me the laws of logic, you agree that whether or not this conversation is actually taking place, or it's taking place in my mind, that the law, none of the laws of logic have been violated. So that's
They
clearly not
don't.
going to. Yeah, so that's not going to give any evidence to the idea that this conversation is actually happening. So,
No, that actually does give credence
oh,
because if
how?
I believe an objective truth claim, that's an objective identity claim, which
Oh.
is the first law of logic.
Well, here's the problem, Costin, is if you're just a figment of my imagination, like I'm just arguing with a religious moral objectivist. I've just heard these arguments so many times. You're actually not a real person. You're just an objectivist that my brain has concocted, has created, and is just giving me these arguments I've already heard. So,
Okay, then what's wrong with the arguments then?
oh, nothing's wrong with them necessarily. Well, I haven't really heard one because I keep asking. I keep asking for clear evidence which would suggest that this is not a hallucination. I haven't heard it yet. I haven't heard
Yeah,
any
because you
evidence
haven't
yet.
given me any sort of objective standard to provide to you. So I'm just going to
Just
keep
give me
throwing the evidence
something.
I am throwing at you, which are the laws
Well,
of
you keep
logic,
giving me
which
the same thing. Wait, you keep giving me the same thing, but we've already agreed that no laws of logic are violated in either scenario. If it is the case that this is a hallucination, it is not logically impossible for this to be a hallucination. It is also not logically impossible for this to be an actual conversation. So that gives me nothing. So give me something else, please.
well, that still infers that the laws of logic are objectively true, though, because whether or not this conversation is a hallucination or is actually happening, that's still an
That's what
objective
I'm
truth
asking.
claim.
I don't care about that. I'm just
That's
trying to
still an
figure out.
objective identity claim, though. That means the
I
laws of
don't
logic are
care about
objectively
that. I don't
true.
care. You're just a person telling me this. I don't care about objective truth. I'm
And that's
asking
still an
you.
identity claim you're making
I'm
right there,
asking
which is
you.
the
Well,
first law of
right now,
logic.
right now, we're talking about epistemic certainty. We're talking about
Yes.
epistemic certainty.
Yes,
Awesome.
and you
So
just
what
gave
I'm
me
looking for.
evidence for epistemic certainty by making objective identity claims, because whether or not this conversation is real or this conversation is a hallucination in your mind, my mind, or the Jacob's mind, that's still an objective identity claim, which is the first law of logic. You just gave that to me. You just confirmed the laws of logic.
So
Thank you.
what I understand what the laws of logic are. That's not the question.
That
The
is the
question, I'm
question,
not
though.
looking. No, I'm not looking to for you to bolster this claim that the laws of logic exist. Right now, I'm not asking you if these truths exist objectively. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you a question about epistemic certainty and how I can be certain, not that it's more than likely the case, not that it's I have a justified true belief that we're having a real conversation. You believe that human beings have access to epistemic certainty. So I am asking you to give me evidence to suggest that we can make a certainty claim that it is impossible that this is just a hallucination. And I have heard no evidence from you.
No, it seems like you're trying to pigeonhole me into a position that I don't actually hold.
No, just
That
you.
seems
But
to be
what
it.
you
And
what
what I'm
you
gonna
do
and
believe in.
what
No,
I
because
do believe in.
what you do believe in, is that human beings have access to epistemic certainty. So all I'm looking for is evidence to suggest that this is impossible. It is impossible that I'm not having this like very vivid hallucination.
And what's your standard of evidence then?
I told you, give me anything.
But that's not a standard, though.
I told you, I'm
That's
lacking a
that's
standard at present. I don't give a shit about it. Throw some stuff at the
so
wall and
so.
we'll see what sticks. Just try anything. Can you give me something? Because before you just said God, and well,
Yeah.
that was not that. I am displeased
Well,
with your answer
why is God objectively not a good justification? Why?
because just saying the word God doesn't give me reason to believe that it's impossible that I would be just having a very vivid hallucination right now, unless you can explain why.
Well, again, like you haven't given me an actual objective standard, and I'm just again going to appeal to the laws of
Okay,
logic
sure.
because,
Well,
like
the
I've
laws
said
of
before a
logic
million
don't tell
times,
me.
the laws of logic are objectively true, whether or not this conversation is actually happening
Cool.
or is a
Okay, great.
hallucination
So
or
let
not.
me. So okay, excellent. So I'll grant. Let's just say I grant you that.
Oh, you
Sure,
grant.
it is. I'll grant it to you right now. Sure. Okay, cool. So I agree with you. Totally, objectively true. Now, can we talk about epistemic certainty since I've given you that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So how do I know with epistemic certainty that this conversation is actually happening and not just a hallucination?
Sure. So I would actually say then, with the laws of logic, correct, that these are mind dependent. You agree with that, right?
That the laws of logic are mind dependent?
Yeah. These are conceptions, like concepts we thought up in our brains.
Sure. Yep.
Sure. Okay. Well, if the laws of logic are objectively true, but they are conceptual, that's a bit of an issue, right? Because if they're mind dependent things, and again, if we're going to go with your viewpoint, if there is no God, we have no way of determining if our
Oh, I'm not
conceptual
asking
things are
that
an
either.
issue,
Yeah,
then
I'm not
that
asking
means
if there's no God. I'm not asking any
no,
of that.
I'm
I'm
giving you
just
my
asking you.
justification for truth. I'm giving you my
No, I
justification
don't
for
want. Wait,
truth.
I don't want your justification for truth. I just need to know for sure whether or not we're having this conversation, or if I'm in just like a super nice padded room in the
Well,
local psychiatric hospital. I am super
that's
unsure.
completely relevant to the conversation because
Well, just
either
tell me
or
how
could
I
be
can know.
objectively true.
Well, tell me how I figure it out.
Either are objectively true. Therefore, the laws of logic and objective truth claims are they have to be true then.
Okay, what do you think? I asked you this before. I'll ask you again. Do you think that I'm having, just like you don't exist, I'm just having like a very vivid hallucination, or do you think we're actually having this conversation right now?
Conversation's happening.
Okay, cool. So why do you believe this to be true?
Because God.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, I was
Because
making
God.
the argument before you interrupted me again, since apparently now you suddenly
All I
you have,
want,
let me make the
all I
let me
want.
make the argument. Stop spurging. Stop
I'm not
spurging.
smirking, but I don't want you to do what you did before. I want you to
No,
explain
you don't want me to
directly.
do what I want to do before because it
I
completely
don't give a
annihilates your
shit.
position. Of course you don't
No,
give a
it
shit
doesn't.
because you're
I don't. I'm
losing.
not.
Because you're
I don't
losing. I
have.
know. I know
I'm
you're
not.
losing. It's
Wait,
okay.
wait, hold on, hold on. No, no, no. I'm not giving you an argument right now. I'm asking you a question. I'm asking you to demonstrate how it would be the case that it is impossible that this conversation is not occurring in my mind. You failed to do this. All you've done is say God. But if it were true that God exists, God would also exist in a world in which psychotic people live. God would also exist in a world where people are incapable of distinguishing like hallucinations from the reality around them. So I don't understand what makes you so special. If you are this convinced that we're truly having this conversation and you can say God is the reason why is that not sufficient evidence for the schizophrenic who believes that they're having conversations with dead people?
Well, I would say both me and the schizophrenic have more justification than you do because you have no way to actually make objective epistemological
Well,
claims.
you haven't given me any evidence. Maybe
No,
Jacob can. Hey,
yeah,
wait, I want to move on to
what's your
Jacob.
standard of evidence though? No, don't move on from
That
me because
just
you're losing.
I
Because you're
said
losing. I
no,
know
it's
you're
not. It's
losing.
just
I
no,
know
I'm
you're
not losing.
losing.
No, I'm
Yes, you are
definitely not
losing.
losing.
You're
You're not.
freaking out right now. You're freaking
No, I'm
out because you're
definitely
getting
not. I am going to mute you for a second because I've been asking the same question and I haven't received any answer from
you
you
haven't
except God.
received any answer that makes your case a lot easier. I know
I'm
because
not
I'm
making
not
a
gonna
case.
fall
I'm
for
not
your
making a claim.
own little
No,
logic
Costin,
tricks.
Costin.
Your logic
Whoa, whoa,
trap.
whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not making a claim. I'm simply asking you for evidence. You failed to provide any. Maybe Jacob can.
You
Hey,
haven't
Jacob,
provided me actual evidence.
you're the one. You're the one making the
You're the
claim, not
one.
me.
You're the one who has not provided me a standard of
I
evidence. You said
mean,
throw whatever sticks.
if you're gonna deny all mind independent facts, like if you're just gonna say that I have no reason to accept that 2 + 2 = 4, that I'm holding my phone in my hand and those kinds of things are mind independent. If you're just gonna deny all of that, then I mean there's not really like great arguments against it. I mean, you can just be a radical skeptic. There's not
Yeah.
much
Well,
anyone can say to that.
this is
That's
what I
just
said, Jacob. So this is what I said. I don't have reason to believe that human beings have access to epistemic certainty. I think justified true beliefs are sufficient. I think that we can have like a great amount of evidence to support an idea or a claim, and that it doesn't it seems to be the case that the proposition is true based on the evidence that we have. When I say true, I just mean it like it's not an, I'm not making any sort of like epistemic certainty claim. I'm just saying, well, it seems to be the case until I have reason to believe it's not. It is more probable than improbable based on the evidence that this is actually the case. I'm just simply saying that there's a difference between saying, well, this seems to be the case, or this is like a justified true belief, versus like epistemic certainty, wherein it is impossible. It is impossible that anything else would be the case.
And how do you arrive to that conclusion?
Well,
I'm
that's what I'm
not
asking you.
No,
I'm
no,
not
you
very
arrived to
good
the
at
no. Let me make the argument first. You have arrived to the conclusion that epistemological skepticism, epistemic skepticism, is the probably the most valid position to hold. Am I correct
Well,
in
it's just
saying that?
lack of
Yes or no?
evidence. It's just lack of evidence. I don't have
Oh,
any evidence to suggest that human beings have access to epistemic certainty. So I'm
okay,
looking for
then.
evidence.
And
I'm
then
seeking.
what is your evidence then? What is that standard of evidence?
I don't at this point have any reason to believe it.
Yeah, so therefore, if you have no standard of evidence, then, and then the argument is you are relying upon evidence, that seems to be a couple propositions right there to the conclusion that epistemological skepticism is probably the most probable
Well, it would be helpful
conclusion.
if you could give me. It would be helpful if you could give me anything other than
Well,
just saying
I'm
God
well,
or
the
four.
only thing I'm using around are the laws of logic because you're also using the laws of logic in that argument.
The problem is that there are no violate like the laws of logic are not violated in either case. If I'm trying to identify which is true, when I'm steelmanning your understanding of the word true, if it is true that in either case no laws of logic would be violated, this doesn't get me any closer to trying to identify which is actually the case.
Yeah, so if we're going to go by that standard, then at least we could point to one thing being true, which is the laws of logic.
Okay, cool. So laws
So,
of
so then,
logic.
yeah, the laws of logic, which apparently you granted and you agree with me on. So,
Yeah, so what do the laws of logic existing have to do with me being uncertain as to whether or not we're truly having this conversation?
well, it seems like your claim is epistemological skepticism. Am I wrong in saying that?
Well, I didn't make a certainty claim. I just said it doesn't seem to be the case that human beings have access to this. I have reason to believe that they do.
What was that? I'm
Because
sorry,
the
you cut
reason
out.
why I say that, and the reason why I say that, is because when I ask a very simple question like this, you can't answer it.
Well, I'm just wondering again, what is your standard of evidence? And you say I don't have a standard of evidence. Okay, here's the laws of logic.
I said just give me something, but you're just telling me something that could be
I
the
am
case.
giving you something, and you don't
Yes,
like
but it
that
could be
something because it
No, it's
wrecks
not
your
that I don't.
position because you are
No,
also using the
no.
same laws of logic.
No, it's not that I don't like it. It's that no
It doesn't
laws
sound
have
like
been.
you like it.
Okay. Costin, the reason I don't like it is because in either case, so if this were a hallucination or this were an actual conversation, the laws of logic would not be violated in either case. So this gives me no information.
Well, we can at least infer one thing for certainty is that the laws of logic are objectively true. Then
Well, I just told you I'm granting you that.
you're granting me that.
I'm granting you that. That doesn't answer
You're
my
granting
question.
me that, and then you also grant me that the laws of logic are mind dependent.
Yeah, I think they are, but that doesn't answer my question.
If they are mind dependent, but they are objectively true, then it can't be grounded in human minds because us human minds,
Well,
we
I
don't
told
have
you.
objective.
I told
Well,
you that I'm like totally fine giving that to you just for the sake of argument. If
okay.
it will
So
lead
then, therefore, the
to you
laws
being
of
able to prove
logic,
to me.
yeah, therefore, then the laws of logic need to be grounded in a superior mind.
All I want is proof beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is impossible that this is not a hallucination. That's all I want. Maybe
Well,